I want to thank you very much for having me here. I'm just so excited to come. The mic's right here.
No, there it's, you're not, it's not on you,
Sure. We'll fix it.
Okay. I don't see anything that. Okay. I need that backlight on so I can read my notes, please. That's great, just like that. Does that work? Is the screen still visible? Very good. So my wife is not here to remind me to stop mumbling and speaking too quietly. So if I start descending into that scene, just yell at me. Not that she would do that.
It says talk.
Okay, so I want to thank you for having me up here. I was so excited to do the talk and meet you all. I was especially excited to be able to leave that hot Phoenix area and come up here to enjoy this cool high elevation climate. I can see why you all love it here so much. I almost had to take a shower after dinner before I could start. So I understand it's been an especially hot summer and challenging, but I thank you for having me here. Just to give you a little background about me, I went to high school, grew up in eastern Pennsylvania in the Allentown, Lehigh Valley area. Yes, Billy Joel. And I attended college at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. I ended up with a degree in horticulture, focusing on greenhouse production. I also took a fair number of business courses because I wanted to start my own business. I worked after graduating in Northeast Ohio, which was a hotbed of nurseries. In Lake County, Ohio, the smallest county in the state, there were 135 registered wholesale nursery growers, and they shipped all over the eastern part of the country. So it was a fabulous place. People shared information. And it was fabulous for me because I could make all kinds of mistakes. Somebody else could pay for it. And then I was ready to start my own business. So I bought some land back in Pennsylvania where my folks were, and started growing as a wholesale grower as well. I think I have that upside down. So this was my nursery. When I bought it, it was an old empty cornfield. If you notice, there's a little stream to the left, and it was a wonderful spring-fed stream that came out of a nearby mountain, the Blue Mountain, which is what I named my nursery. And I started with just 6 greenhouses right here, and over time, as things progressed well, I expanded and just kept building and building and building. So that was my business. What got me started was a plant. Does anybody know Pachysandra terminalis? It's a very, very popular ground cover. It's deer proof. It grows in shade. And this is really how I got it started, because it was all labor and very little investment in materials. And I was a laborer. I did a lot of the cutting, but as we grew, I ended up hiring a crew. Probably the last 10 years, we averaged right around 1 million cuttings a year of Pachysandra, and that was in one whole row of the greenhouses. So this whole area was set up as a mist area. They were constantly wet, and once they rooted, we'd wean them off like you would any other plant. I also got into herbaceous perennials, ferns, hostas, daylilies, that sort of thing. I finally got to see some that I was familiar with up here in Albuquerque. And it's funny how you forget things. I'm looking at one of my favorite crops at Ralph's house, and I'm like, I don't remember it anymore. I'm a cactus guy, but it's the plumbago, ceratostigma, and it was a wonderful crop. So we grew all kinds of things. So this was one row, and you can sort of see the Pachysandra area behind there. I also did a lot just outdoor growing where they would just sit out all winter. If it got real severe, I'd cover them with frost blanket. I also did some annuals in a heated greenhouse. And I also fooled her a little bit with roses. We did a lot of ornamental grasses. They have become less and less popular, of course, because they're very invasive. But I was very happy. There was a beautiful, beautiful property. There were trout in the stream, not that I ever had time to fish, but it was just a gorgeous place to leave. And people say, well, why in the world would you leave a beautiful property like that? And I think you have the answer. I'm a sunshine addict, and it was cloudy there all the time, and I just wasn't real happy. So the snow was really a problem. One year I had 19 out of 26 greenhouses collapse. And it was one thing I want to mention is oh, let me hand these out and around. If we could hold questions until the end, that would probably be best. So maybe, whoop, going into the wire. If you could get these rounding around, I'd really appreciate it. So anyway, the other thing we ended up with and is in addition to that, we had very high winds, violent thunderstorms come across. This was the day I decided to stop. It was in 2014. There were other things going on. It just wasn't working out. And in 20 minutes, half of my crop in the middle of May, which is our hottest season, was unsaleable. And it just, I stood in the barn and we all stood there and just watched it. And that was that. And I just decided I had it with any frozen precipitation whatsoever. I'll move anywhere to get away from that. So I moved to Phoenix. And I was really surprised when that happened. I'm in the northern part, so I can do a lot of things. I'm at about almost 1,000 feet higher than downtown. So I'm just that much cooler at night. The daytime temperatures are close to the same, but the nighttime temperatures are very much lower. And I think that's how I'm able to do a lot of what I do. Of course, that was just one day and it's gone the next day. So I had this beautiful place. The other thing is I was retired. I was done with plants. So I just did a little bit out front and I said, that's it. And I was absolutely not going to do anything more with plants. So it just grew and grew. I really got addicted to these cacti. I just love them. I would love to just start over and do this instead. They're just so beautiful and so fun. And
Or lipids.
that might happen someday if my arm gets twisted hard enough. Ralph was teasing me about growing listens. You can see them right there in the back. But I do have a few. But anyhow, I did that. So this was a greenhouse I built in 2018. That was really the first year I started seriously collecting plants. And I knew I needed a place to protect them over the winter. But I started also building these hoop areas to store things. And it just kept going and going and going. I just had so much fun with it. So that's really me. That's my little story in cacti. So I'm a newbie to it. I'm terrible at nomenclature. I'm not really a good botanist, but I do love to grow plants. So I've really gotten interested in seed growing because it's so rewarding to really truly grow the plant from start. And Mesa Garden has been just fabulous for me for getting seeds and getting to know these things. So here we go. Oh, that's one other thing. That's my backyard. That's my greenhouse. And this area here, I should use the pointer, where those tables are sitting, that was where all of my gardening on the property was going to take place. That was the plan. So my wife just rolled her eyes. She knew it would last. But anyhow, so that's where I'm living right now. So let's talk about the what we're really here, and that is a fertilizer. You've heard the phrase a million times about, the green thumb. And people said, oh, Eric, you have a green thumb. And I wash and wash and wash, and it's not green. I don't believe in the green thumb. I believe that there's nothing magic about it. It's just simply understanding and knowing the science. And when I was talking to Rob about that, he said, you know, we're gonna have some pretty highly educated chemists and physicists here. And I was like, oh my God. So I got to meet them both and made sure they weren't gonna embarrass me too much. So I say thumbs down to green thumbs. I say it's science. So I'm now going to share with you my secret. I was very proud to have Steve Brack say that I was a very good grower. So I'm going to share with you exactly how I do it. And so it's two steps. You figure out what the plant wants, and you give it that. That's
right.
that's it. So I want to thank you for having me here. So that's how I look at it. Really, plants are nothing but complex, incredibly complex chemical reactions, living in a changing environment, and they are truly remarkable. So we're going to get to talk about math and chemistry, and we're even going to have a story problem. So I'm sure you'll all just to love that. Just a little bit of framework. I'm going to try to make some puzzle pieces and then throw it all together. The thrust of what I'll be speaking about is what I've been doing with potted plants, because it's such a unique culture. Although I use these same practices slightly altered in my in-ground plants. It's such a hostile environment there. I really need to have shade on things, and I don't have shade on my property very much. So I really had to go to the potted route, and I enjoy them. They're just a lot of fun. But potting is not natural. It's not natural. It doesn't, you never see that on a nature walk. So there are changes you have to make, I believe, to make a plant that's adapted to grow in places like this to living in a pot. In the ground, pots often are the plants. The root sprawl is amazing. You know, I've seen ocotillo roots 50, 60 feet away from the plant. Same way with saguaro roots. You know, so why do they spread like that? Because we get little dribs and drabs of rain. The roots have to be really close to the surface to get a drink when you get a little 1/4 inch sprinkle or a 1/2 inch sprinkle. So that's how they grow. But you're going to take that and you're going to shove it into a pot. And all of a sudden now they've got to be living down deep, and it's just a whole different culture. So in the ground, fertility can be provided because it's in the soil. There can be organic matter in the soil, but in the pot, depending on your mix, you have to provide it. I've seen 4 or 5 collections since I've been here, and everybody's doing a different thing with their potting mix. So when I speak, I'm talking about what I'm doing with mine. And I think having an understanding of this all makes it easy or possible for you to adapt what you might hear tonight to what you're doing. So just be aware, I'm not saying this is how you have to do it. I've seen beautiful plants in all kinds of situations, so just be aware of that. Just to get started, to give some of the basic knowledge, the essential nutrients that have to be provided to the plant are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and they're coming from the air and water, right? They're in there. The macronutrients are the ones that are needed in larger quantities, just like food as opposed to vitamins. So they're the ones you need to do more. And of course, we're all familiar with NPK. Those, if you see 3 numbers of a fertilizer, that's the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. There are other ones considered to be macronutrients: calcium and magnesium and sulfur. Micronutrients: iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum. Did I say that right? Sure. Okay. Chlorine and nickel. And there's probably others that are just so minutely used, we just don't worry about them. The fertilizer components are referred to in simple terms as salts. And while they exhibit similar properties to sodium chloride, the salt we know, they are not the same thing. But you will hear the phrase fertilizer salts, and just be aware those are the components of a typical fertility situation. Plants have very limited capacity for storing nutrients. They can store water, they can store some nutrients, but it's not infinite. That's not exactly true. Obviously, caudiforms can store all kinds of goodies and send it up in the sac. But as far as the salt type nutrients, they have a limited capacity to store. So they really need somewhat of a steady uptake of the nutrients for optimal growth as water is brought up into the plants. Cation exchange capacity is the capability of a soil to hold the fertilizer salts, the nutrients, and also then to release them. So what happens in the ground where you're not fertilized in nature is you get a rain, there's a little bit of nutrients in the soil, and some of them become dissolved in the water. Plant takes them up, and there you go. So it's really basically what happens. So when in normal, what I call normal agriculture, like corn farmers or whatever, they fertilize in the spring, they've got soils that hold the nutrients, and then as it rains or they irrigate through the summer, it gets released into the water, taken up by the plant. The type of soil, the components of the soil, there's three basic parts in sand. There's sand and loam, which some people refer to as silt, and also clay. And there's also organic matter. So the higher the number, the better the capacity. So sand has virtually no nutrient holding capacity. They'll just wash right through. Silt or loam is a value of 5 to 15. Clay is greater than 30. Organic matter is extremely high. Now, when I say organic matter, I'm speaking about composted, broken down organic matter, not grass clippings dug into your yard, because they'll actually gobble up the nutrients as they're broken down. Just to further explain, a heavy clay soil will have a higher ability to hold nutrients, and a sandier, gravelly soil will have less of ability to hold the nutrients, and of course, organic matter's in there as well. So, very basically, what occurs, there's two basic ways that the plants take up water, and this is a very commonly not known about or misunderstood topic. Most people realize that in the heat of the day, a leafy plant will have water evaporating out of the stomata in the leaves. It creates somewhat of a vacuum type suction, and you get this capillary action in the xylem and phloems, and pulling things up into the plant. But if you think about it, it's really replacing what's going out. It's not bringing in more, is it? So the other way is what's called osmotic pressure. Now, here's where we're going to get into a little bit of chemistry. Everybody knows that if you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean and it capsizes and you're on the lifeboat, you don't drink the salt water. Well, the reason for that is that the amount of salt in the water is greater than the amount of salt that's in your body. So it'll actually remove water from your body. So the saltier the soil, or the more fertilizer that's in that water, the less uptake you're going to get, because there's not the difference in the salinity. I don't know how to explain it better than that. Does that get it through? Or okay. So what this tells us is that really loading the soil up with fertilizer can be detrimental because the plant isn't pulling up the water through this osmotic pressure. Because it's so salty, there's not that much difference between the plant. Whereas a low amount of fertilizer, you'll get more water uptake. So it's sort of a catch-22, I guess you'd have to say. So the two soil components that hold the nutrients are clay and composted organic matter. Both of those tend to keep your soil wet for a long time because they're wet things. So with cacti and succulents, how can you load up the soil with nutrients when you're trying to avoid the very things that could be harmful in terms of rot, which is clay and heavy amounts of organic matter? Am I making sense there? So you sort of have a problem. How am I going to get the fertilizer to the plant if I can't use the media that's storing the nutrition? So so the answer is you don't have to. You don't really have to load the soil with the fertilizer. You can provide it in different ways. And I don't even know if they're doing it anymore, but there's this thing called hydroponics where the plants weren't in soil at all. They just simply had something to support the plant structure, and then all the nutrition was provided in the water. And I'm not sure that's as popular agriculture method as it had been. So what I refer to what I do as desert hydroponics. So the idea is that if you look at the soil as a place just for the roots to be, to grow, to support the plant, and look at the water that comes in as already having the nutrients that they might have gotten by pulling the nutrients out of the clay and organic matter. That's really basically what I push towards in how I do things. So as you're thinking about a potting mix, if you think about it in terms of, is this just a good place to get aeration to the roots? I think you'll do better. So in real estate, there's a saying, location, location, location. My feeling is on potting mix, and this I did as well in Pennsylvania with my water loving plants, as I would here, is porosity, porosity, and porosity. I think you really want to get the air to the roots. So when you're creating a mix, you want to try to have something that is very porous. There's a concept called nesting. It's sort of like the Russian doll thing, and that is if you put marbles into a box, you say, well, that box is full, but you can add BBs. And the BBs go in there too, and well, now it's full, and then you can add sand, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what are you losing as you add those other things to that box that you thought was full? You're losing air, right? As I put the BBs in, the air goes out. So when you're designing a mix or you're considering a mix, I believe you want to avoid the nesting situation. In road construction back home, very popular driveway surface, they call it quarter minus, and what that is stone it's quarter inch, and anything else that goes through that sieve, and it can become, you can play basketball on this stuff once it's compacted, because the great big ones are there, and then the medium ones and small and smaller. It's really a little bit like how concrete works. So I try to avoid the porosity, and when the organic matter is used, it's why? Because it's readily available, high cation exchange capacity, but uncomposted uses fertilizer. Composted can provide fertility, but it loses porosity as it breaks down. So if you're potting a plant and you don't want to be repotting it every 2 years, if you use all organic matter, it's just, and you've probably bought plants where they're just sink and sink and sink. you're eliminating the porosity and you're increasing the danger of rot. Peat moss can be used, and of course, that's a no-no, we know that, because of how hard it is to wet it. I use a lot of cocoa fiber, composted bark. You can read, I don't need to read these things to you. But I think, these are some of the characteristics of organic matter, in a potted mix. I bought this on sale at Lowe's. That was the top of the soil in that pot. There were 3 ponytails, 3 Bocconarias in there. And it had sunk down, and it was amazing that those things had even lived. But I think what happened was the finer components eventually just kept running out the bottom. But if you're buying a plant and you see it's way down in the pot, that tells you the plant's been there a long time. The growers are doing that because they, once you buy it, it's not their problem anymore. So they take advantage of some of the positive aspects of growing in organic, but I don't believe it's a good long-term solution for collector plants that you want to keep around for quite a while. So if organic matter is so bad, why do we have it? Well, for me, the number one reason why I put it in my mix is because it supports beneficial microbes. And they are very important. And cacti, from what I've been able to find out, are especially needful of having a healthy microbe situation in where they're growing. The other thing that happens if you have a little bit of organic matter is that you can have what feels like a dry mix with good porosity, but it's still humidifying and providing moisture to the air that's around the roots. So you won't kill off as many of the little tiny roots, and that's where all the action takes place. It can shrink and actually increase porosity. I'm going to pass around samples. So I haven't potted all summer, and I went out to my stash of potting soil and I took 2 scoops of it. It was all bone dry, and I put those equal scoops in these 2 bags, and then I wetted this one first, so you can tell which is dry and which is wet. And if you could just pass those around, let people look at it. Oh, did I get the handouts out? Yeah, I did it. Okay.
This is core based.
So that mix is 50% what I call large pumice, probably 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch pumice. It's 25% cocoa core fiber. When you buy cocoa core, sometimes it has like those little cubes in it. I don't use that. I don't need the cubes. I'm really after the quick. The reason I like cocoa core is because it wets amazingly fast. And so if you're doing it right, letting your plants dry out, really dry out between waterings, getting it wet again, peat moss is a disaster. It just won't wet, but cocoa core does it really, really fast. And then the other 25%, I've been using Miracle Grow potting mix. You could use whatever, but I think one of the important things to reduce the water in there is to use an amendment, whether it's stone or whatever, so that half the soil is just not holding water except for what might stick to the surface.
Are you gonna have a slide with your recipe?
I'm sorry, I don't know. It might be in the handout, I'm not sure. I'll repeat it if you want to take a note, and it's very simple. It's 50% large pumice, and it's 25% cocoa core fiber and 25% Miracle Grow potting mix. If you wanted to buy a bag of cactus mix and then add equal amounts of pumice to that, I think you'd get a similar result. I'm not super fussy about it. I just like the core because I know that if my plants get completely dry, which I want, they'll become wet again when I water. I don't have to stand there all day with a hose. Now, Steve, to answer your question a little better, that's just my basic mix. So if I'm potting PD cactus or echinocassis or things that I think are water haters, I just throw some extra pumice into that pot. So I might have some in that's 75% pumice. Those little guys you saw inside the greenhouse, I think I had, I don't know, I have, like in the cactus polyacanthus or whatever, are they calling it homocephala? I don't know. I have it in that. So if you know that a plant is very rot prone, also very, tuberous plants, you really don't want them sitting wet. So if I have a very, tuberous type plant with or a giant fat taproot, I'll probably put in extra pumice. So like Ariocarpus, things like that. So I just went backwards in that. Oh, so why do the commercial growers use 100% organic? It's inexpensive in life, it lasts till they sell the plant. They being a commercial grower, that's their job to maintain the moisture management. And I strongly suspect that the really big growers like Altman's, you get those little things with little, and you peel off the little rubber flower and hope you don't kill the meristem. Those plants, they look like they're impure. They look like they're embedding plants to me. I don't have any evidence to this, but I strongly suspect that they are heavily drenched with rot prevention fungicides. I just can't see how they could do that any other way. I could be wrong.
State law issues,
Pardon me?
state law issues when they cross borders.
Oh, okay. What, I explain that better.
States have rules against having certain ingredients in.
Oh, okay, that's a good reason too. But it's happening. I mean, they work. They're nice little plants, but it's not what I would throw in. So here and I understand you can get pumice here. You can't get it in Phoenix. You have to go down to Tucson, but pumice, of course, there's perlite. There's an expanded shale that we used to use heavily. I don't know if they still have it around. When I say volcanic rock, I'm talking about that red scoria. Red scoria is good, and I guess there are also clay beads. I've never used. Well, I was all about perlite because that's what we use back home. And at first I was like, pumice, that's for soap, and I found out that it's fabulous. I love this stuff. So high porosity media, good aeration, low porosity. So this is sort of a picture of nesting going on, that if you have your big particle and you fill it up too much with the little particles, you can reduce your porosity. Just to go over again, we're going to just talk about the actual nutrients and how to provide them. Pardon me, I have lost my place, but I do apologize. Give me just one moment. Okay, I'm back. I apologize for that. I get carried away and all excited and I lose track. It happens. Again, we see these basic nutrients. So somehow you got to get them in the pot. You gotta give them. You can't build a brick house if you don't have bricks. These plants are made of chemicals. They need chemicals. You gotta put. We don't have to, but if you want the plant to grow as well as you can, you need to make sure they can get with the parts they need. So again, these are the parts. The other piece I want to put together is the effect of pH on pH is the acidity or the alkalinity of the water or the soil. And this is a very important chart. You may have seen this before, but you see the red lines there indicating the prime zone for, and this is for container growing, not necessarily, and it isn't for all plants, but as you probably saw in the slides, I had a lot of different things growing the same way and being treated differently. So the acidity or the alkalinity, what we call the pH of the soil, greatly affects the availability of micronutrients. I'm gonna try this little fancy laser pointer. And this one right here is huge. What is pH of your city water here? Do you know what it's running at? Does anybody?
5.
7.5
to 8.
to 8.
As high as 8.5.
Yeah, we have 8.3 there,
But it's,
so
it's a very, easy to make a decision again.
has a low buffer capacity.
Yeah, very, very low buffer.
Okay, so, what I'm trying to lead to is if you just use water straight out of the hose, you're gonna have a problem, with the availability of phosphorus. And, generally speaking, iron becomes a little bit low.
Let me just jump in with one thing. The reason your tap water is basic all across the country, 7.5 to 8.5, is that way the metal stays in the metal pipes.
Oh,
If you had.
can you hear this?
If you.
Sig is saying that it's intentionally run at a high pH to protect metal pipes from corrosion.
Thinking recently with a poison, the entire population is down. If they saved $100 a year on not jacking the pH from 6.5 to 7. And that 6.5 water was sucking the lead out of the pipes. Poisoning kids forever. There's no way to reverse that. So anyway, that's why the water has to be basic. So if you have, we will eventually have all plastic pipes, but that'll be 100 years. But that's why you brought it up, Jack, and the pH up to 7.5 to 8.5.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting. It's generally thought that one of the most critical nutrients for good flowering on plants is phosphorus. And if you are not getting out of that little skinny zone with your phosphorus by adjusting the pH of the water, you may have a shortage of phosphorus, and that may be a reason why flowering isn't happening quite why you like. So one piece of my fertility, in addition to adding nutrients, is adjusting to try to get it down. I try to run mine at around 5.75, 5.75. We can talk maybe afterwards about ways of finding out what you're adjusted. Yes, sir.
One more thing about the chemistry here. We've been, I think, in the club for the last 5 or 10 years, we've talking about adding vinegar to tap water. That's what you're doing with that chart right there. You're jacking the pH down to where the plant can take up the phosphorus. And whether you add 1 tablespoon or 2 or 3 or 5, it doesn't matter really. Per gallon.
Yeah, I actually have some of that data here, and but it's exactly right. And vinegar is commonly used. That's very.
It's cheap. Don't use the apple wine. It's the cheapest stuff you can find. By the way, I made vinegar at the lab for the last 10 years. Only the vinegar I made at 13 years, 13 there. And it was very expensive vinegar.
Great. Well, thank you for adding that, and I'll cover that not as well as an actual chemistry guy, but I'll certainly do my best. So part of the nutrition program is adjusting the acidity of the water. And there's vinegar, and there are some other methods. I've been using vinegar myself. Let me go to the next slide. If you're growing in ground or using something that's blocked by that black thing there, I think it's high cation exchange mix, you test the soil. Why do you test the soil for nutrients? Because the soil is holding and then providing nutrients for the plants. But with desert hydroponics, what I call desert hydroponics, the irrigation water needs to be tested. So people say, do I test my potting soil? Never. There's no reason to. It's just a physical place for the plant roots to grow. Adjust the pH to near 0, and you want to make sure that you test water if you're fertilizing after you've added the fertilizer, if you're fertilizing all the time, because some of the fertilizers will affect the acidity or alkalinity of the soil. Our Phoenix water is over 8. I add white vinegar at the rate of it's final, right around 1 teaspoon per gallon of final fertigation. Fertigation is a word, irrigation with fertilizer in it. Don't use pool test strips or your tongue or anything to test the pH. Try to get a hold of a good quality meter. Yes, sir.
I have to jump in, or you can buy bromothymol blue from Amazon. It's a liquid, pour a couple of drops in the water, and you look at the color.
Yeah,
It's consistent.
yeah, I do pool testing. You know, I use my pool test kit, but I have a super high quality meter in my pool. I have one.
Looking at the color.
Yeah, I understand. I think using an actual meter that's calibrated is, to me, it's worth the investment. So you also need, remember on the list, we had calcium and magnesium, which are not on the fertilizer label. Those are absolutely necessary ingredients for growing plants. The problem is they drive the pH up. When I learned to add that to my mix because I know I wanted acidity, and I did it back home in my mix, but I wasn't doing it with a cactus mix. I'm not gonna make an excuse. I just was dumb and didn't do it. Mark Dimmitt, are you familiar with that name? He's a big addendum guy down in Tucson, wonderful, brilliant man. And he was giving a talk and he said, you know, to add lime. And I said, well, that's gonna drive the pH up. He said, well, do more to drive the pH down or whatever. So I do add this in my mix. I should have written down some of these numbers. I am currently using 6 ounces per cubic yard of my mix, that bag that's going around. I mix that into the media. Why? Because they are not available to be provided by the commercial liquid feed products. There is some magnesium in the soluble fertilizers. However, I don't think it's enough. So you say, well, why do you even have organic matter? And I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to go a little further into that, and that is that you need to support a healthy biosphere, if that's the word we want to use, for the plant. So you can see there's good bacteria and bad bacteria, and there's something that's called a rhizosheath. If you've ever bare rooted a plant and you see all the soil and the organic matter sticking to it, that is a good indicator if you don't have a microscope of knowing that you probably have a good, healthy, desirable fungal infection of mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza are a fungus that grows both inside the root and on the outside of the root, and they tend to adhere and they assist the plant in the uptake of nutrients. It's very, very important. This is a seedling I grow. I have no idea what it is. You guys can probably tell. I don't remember. But I start my seeds in around 80 to 85% humus and 15% to possibly 20% organic matter. And you can see the pumice all fell off almost, but look at how much organic matter grabbed out of that, what little was available. So I think that's very, very important. So, I'll mention this too, if you're sterilizing the soil, I do, most of my plants I'm doing from seed. I wait till my wife's not nearby and I go in the kitchen and start cooking the stuff in the microwave and it smells like really bad licorice. It's an awful smell. So I make sure she's outside or something. But I sterilize the soil. I'm killing the good guys and the bad guys. So in order to do that, I've started reintroducing a mycorrhiza back into it as the plants grow. On my seedlings, I'm drenching it with that about a week in after germination. I add that in. You obviously have to have the plant. I do a second application about 3 or 4 weeks later. there's a million snake oil things on the market. There's all kinds of stuff. Mycorrhiza is a scientifically proven thing. I had a very hard time deciding what kind to buy, and what sold me on it was that yucca plant. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Which way do I go? Yucca plant extract. I thought that's the best I can do, because most of them don't tell you at all. It's just magic. It's a secret. But I like this one, and I've been using this stuff, and I will every once in a while just do everything with it. I've never killed you're not going to kill the plant with it. It's a sort of a very fine black powder, and you have to keep stirring it or it'll just all settle out. But I use that, and it goes a long way. I think a packet might be $25, and I end up throwing them away after a couple of years. I haven't used them all, and I buy a new one. If you keep them in the refrigerator, they tend to last a lot longer. So I reintroduced that. A lot of people now, I'm not really clear. They say a couple years, but I have so much at risk and involved there that I keep it a couple years and then I just toss it and use it. But, oh, maybe I'm answering this wrong. Once your plant is infected, like good infected, it should, unless something happens to kill that root system or something, it should be permanently. It's like an inoculation. It's a once and done thing. I do it a second time because I want to make sure that I've really gotten a good dose into those young seedlings. I've seen people use Osmocote. I used to buy it by the pallet. It's wonderful stuff. If you're familiar with it, you know that it's a blended fertilizer coated with a membrane. When you water the first time, it dissolves and makes like a brine inside that. And then in subsequent waterings, that brine moves into the soil. The problem is that once that prill dries out, that little ball, because, you know, we're cactus people and succulents, sorry, that the next time you water, it's not going to release because it's got to redissolve the contents of that prill. Very good friend that has a cactus nursery, and he top dresses, throws that on top, and he may as well just be throwing, I think, his money on top of the plant, because it just doesn't work. This is what I'm using. In Phoenix, nobody else was doing this. And I thought, well, I'm an outlier, I'm crazy, and because there's not enough phosphorus and everything else in there. I come up here and everybody's using it. So I was just like, wow, you know, I did it right accidentally. This is really my main fertilizer. It has everything in it that you need, and it has background so you can do a story problem to figure out how much to put in your mix. I'm going to try to help you with that a little bit down the line. Fertility it's all about ratios, and of course it's about amounts, but 20-20-20 is no stronger than 10-10-10 if I put twice as much 10-10 as I do 20-20-20. Does that make sense? So your amount is really determined by how much of that product you put out. So people who spend money in buying like 2, 4, 3 fertilizer, you're just paying for water and filler. The higher the concentration, you just dilute it more if you want less. It's really quite that simple. In the nursery industry, and by the nursery industry, I mean the nursery industry that I spent most of my life doing, the gold standard Osmocote and fertilizer was an 18-6-12 mix. That's just what people side dressed it in their nursery fields or tilled it in before planting. It's just what people use. So if you break that down, the ratio is 3 parts nitrogen, 1 part phosphorus, and 2 parts potassium. That's the ratio. So that's technically high nitrogen fertilizer because it's a higher number. 20-20-20 looks like it's more, but it's really 1-to-1-to-1, or to do the division easily, it's 18 to 18 to 18. So it's 3 times more of the middle number, phosphorus. So technically 20 based against common practice is 3 times more phosphorus. And I think that's a lot of what helps me get the good flowering to do. So lowering the pH to get that down there, and then really basically providing a higher amount of phosphorus. Phosphorus, the other thing to know about that is that it stays in the soil. And it can actually now this is for the in-ground, not for what we're talking about with potted liquid feed, but in the ground, it can actually, I don't know how to say it other than it's gonna gobble up the storage sites in the soil and basically, it's a terrible way to say it, it's gonna knock off the ability to hold particularly iron and manganese. So those nutrients drop off because the phosphorus is taking it all the space. Yes, sir.
In correct chemistry, you're making the phosphate of the iron, which is insoluble. So it's as if the iron or the phosphate are not there, because a plant can only take up nutrients if they dissolve.
Great, well, that's the background behind it. So basically what happens is the phosphorus attaches to the iron and becomes an unusable compound is basically what you're.
Iron and phosphorus.
For then they both don't become available. Just in case folks don't know this, when you see yellow that's not caused by sunburn, it's almost not 100% sure bet, but it's a good bet that you're low on iron. So just a physical indicator, if you see a plant that's yellow and you can't say it's yellow because it was too much sun or yellow for some other reason, it may be you need to get the iron up and add supplemental. I don't have that specifics about that. So it's the ratio, but it's also the amount. Strength is not a unit of measurement. It's not a universal measurement. So when people say, I use this at quarter strength, well, this manufacturer might have an idea that this is full strength. The other guy has the idea that that's in full strength. And it just becomes useless information, really. I shouldn't say it's useless, but it doesn't give you as much detail and true information. So in the industry standard, the way to talk about it in a blended fertilizer is in parts per million of nitrogen. So you go back to the ratio. So when you base the amount you use on how much nitrogen you're putting in, if you wanted more phosphorus, you would increase the phosphorus number. But as I said, the triple 20 seems to work out really well. Bedding plant growers use 200 to 400 on maybe intermittent feeding, depending on the soil type, but it's a very high level. So if you wanted to say that 200 is full strength, then I'm using quarter strength. But so that anybody can talk to anybody, you convert it, just learn about parts per million and you'll find out, well, how do I know what parts per million? It's on the bag. So if you mix it properly and you proportion it properly, you're going to get the parts per million. If you really want to know, and this is an investment that I think is well worth it, is to get something called an EC or electrical conductivity meter. And that is a meter that measures the amount of salt in a solution, in our case, water. So it will tell you, I don't want to go back to the bag. So basic water has a certain amount of electrical conductivity. So when you're testing the water, 50 parts per million of triple 20, you want an electrical conductivity of 0.43. So what I would do is I'd measure my water and say my water is 0.5. So I want to get 0.93 on my meter. I don't know, does that make sense? I want to know what I'm getting, but I've learned to trust the setup and the consistency of it. Once you have a recipe, you don't need to fool with that. It's very safe. I have put it on when I made that slide, I was waiting for 8 weeks. I'm now doing 25 parts per million a week after germination. Why? Because my mix is there's no nutrition in the soil. That little thing, I mean, how much is there in that little seed to feed that little seedling? It's got to have something. So by adding a little bit of the liquid feed, that's what I do. Back in my nursery, this is how I liquid fed. So in addition to the osmocote code, I added more. This was these little blue things. Let's see if I can do that without changing slides. They're called pumper heads. So this one pumped, I think it was hydrochloric acid. I used to get these little 43-gallon or 43-pound drums of this stuff. And these two were sucking fertilizer out of a concentrate tank behind the building. It went in there, and that big giant white tube was a place for it to get mixed together so that I wasn't sending fertilizer Morse code out my pipes. It was all blended, so what came out was very consistent. So I think I spent $9,000 on this to put it up, plus my time later. Anybody want to do that? I guess not. So there's cheaper ways to go about it. Oh, by the way, this was my meter. So it was telling me my pH going out. The middle one was my EC meter saying what was actually coming. I knew what I was putting on my plants, and it was nice. I really loved it. What I have at home as my main source of adding fertilizer is a water-driven piston injector. You may have seen these at some nurseries. And basically what happens is the water flow moves a piston up and down and sucks a little bit of the concentrate into there and adds it into the water. This is how I do it. So I did the math and everything else, and there's settings, you can change it. And then I measured again to make sure that's what I'm getting when I do 50 parts per million. The other thing I do is acidification. The problem for me in my situation is that I run that water over my whole house, including the property, and I cannot afford the amount of vinegar or citric acid it would take to do it all. Plus, it gets to be a little messy mixed together in a concentrate tank. So just last week, so I could get away and have automatic irrigation, leave, not worry about it, I added a second injector, and that one is adding the vinegar very close to the site. So I have totally adjusted water. I also brought this in because this injector, that's upwards of $500. And I found this one on Amazon, and I thought for the money, it was $119, and it's working like a dream. And I've measured the output, and it's really nice. How long it lasts, I don't really know, but that seems to me to be a somewhat small investment to save you a lot of trouble. The other thing I do quite a bit is the hose on. Is anybody familiar with the hose on? Okay, the hose on works by narrowing the stream flow, which creates a vacuum that pulls water out of a tank. So when it's operating, I'm using the hose. I better put it this way. So this is the hose on, the water is flowing through there. It's going through a very restricted area, and it's sucking the concentrate out of that, and out it goes. This is a picture of the inside of the hose on. And the reason I shared that is these things are really twitchy, and I really like them, but they are not really that accurate. They're supposed to provide a 1:16 ratio. So for every 16 gallons of irrigation water, I'm adding 1 gallon of concentrate. And they're very much dependent on the rate of flow, the length of hose, and everything else. But what I like about them is you can do a lot of water without having to stand there mixing all day. So they're very handy. What I wanted to share is this right there, that's a ball bearing. And what that does is that moves back and forth so that when the water's on, if you turn the outflow water off, that little ball bearing moves right down there and stops the irrigation water from just going back into the concentrate bucket. And they often get locked. So every time I use them, I take the hose off and I look in there, and I generally take like a paper clip or a pin or whatever, and I make sure that that ball is loose, and I blow on it. If I can blow air through, that tells me it's not frozen up. I can't tell you how many times before I learned to do this, I'd be watering for an hour and a half. I come back and there wasn't a drop gone from the concentrate tank because that ball bearing, this little guy right there, it stayed there. It was locked because it's just frozen in place. So you really need to check that. It's really important if you decide to use these. what's nice is I can mix 5 gallons of concentrate in here. And 5 times roughly 15 is a lot, 75, so I can get 75 gallons of irrigation water with no fooling around. I mix up the tank, I go water, and I rarely use up a whole amount of that. Okay. So I check to make sure I see a little blue in my outlet water, just to make sure it's working. So when I'm out there, I have those laying around and I just make sure. So I see a little bit of blue in the white can. The
reason that the 2020 is blue is that that color is added by the manufacturer. So you know when it's in the water you're putting on your plants.
Okay,
You'll see it's blue.
yeah, so they dye it blue, sort of like when they spray weeds and they have the green in the spray on your yard, they add the blue, so you know you got it, and that's exactly why the blue is in there. So when I am using the hose on and doing vinegar and fertilizer together, I have a limited shelf life. Critters start growing in there, and you can see there's just all kinds of gunk and glop in there. So it's a problem for me because I have to end up dumping a lot if I don't use it right away. I just learned, I went with Rob over to Mesa Garden, and he was adding citric acid to a concentrate tank. And I said, does anything ever grow in there? And he said, no. I'm going to be looking very heavily into changing from vinegar to citric acid, because it is really a bothersome thing to have that going on. But
And the bag doesn't cost very much.
no, it doesn't cost very much. And so if you invite me here again and I know more and you want to hear the same talk over, I'll just, the only change will be the citric acid.
What are you adding instead of the vinegar?
Citric acid, it's used, I think they use it mixing soft drinks. It's a wonderful substance for all kinds of purposes.
It's much more acidic than vinegar in the sense that there are 3 acidic parts to every molecule, right? So, you drive pH down somewhat lower. And or less will drive the pH to where you want it.
Yeah,
And
So-
you take a teaspoon of dry stuff, dump it in the can, off you go, or whatever the proper amount.
well, and what's nice is if it doesn't grow stuff, then I can just use half a bucket and come back in 3 days and use it again and not be thinking about it. I'm so excited about it. So you always learn. I've learned when you visit places, you go places, you ask questions, you always learn stuff. It's just wonderful. So I wanted to point that out. So that's been my way to do it when I take down my automatic injector, because I don't want it freezing over the winter. And I'm not watering as much in the winter either, so it doesn't really matter. So another way I do it is, and this is what I am recommending to a lot of folks who just want to get started with it. And that is to make a little tiny gallon jug of concentrate. And then when it's time to water, I can just take my concentrate jug and add that to my sprinkling can. So I make up a solution that I add the right amount of fertilizer into my gallon jug. And then when it's time to water from the sprinkling can, for every gallon in the sprinkling can, I use 1 cup and dump it in. If you make things easy to do, you're more likely to do it. And if it's a big hassle, then, oh, I don't feel like fertilizing. So people say, well, I don't feel like fertilizing, so I'm just gonna fertilize real heavy 3 times a year. And the roots are getting killed, and it's just not, I don't know about you, but I like to eat every day, not once every month. So this constant liquid feeding is another thing I didn't mention. By running low levels all the time, you're really giving a minimum. Yes, sir.
And you're also fertilizing the heat of summer when plants are mostly dormant.
I crank it down to 25, or I do sometimes stop. My problem is that I have a gazillion different species in one watering situation, and some are trying to grow and some aren't. I have not harmed my PDOs. I don't have that many of them, or any of my ancestral cactus or anything like that by summer watering with light fertilizer. So I have not had problems with that, but it's a very good question. In the winter, I stop. I mean, if they're shut down, I'm just not gonna do it. So in the summer, I just went down to 25 parts per million for a while, just so I'm not starving anybody to death, but I'm not hurting anybody. They'll use it if they want. I mean, they'll take up the water if they want.
How often do you water?
Okay, so I have, my watering in 3 different groups. And I made that change last year. So I have my 6-inch pot and bigger watering cycle. In Phoenix, I'm doing that once a week in that mix that I passed around. My second group of plants are my 4-inch and 4.5-inch plants. And, those I'm watering every 4 days right now. My little guys, my little 2.5-inch plants that are actively growing, I'm watering every 2 days.
2 days.
Now that's in Phoenix, where it's always hot, not just hot for a week like here.
No, it's always hot here now.
Yeah. So when people say, how often should I water, that's what I'm doing. I have so many plants, I can't go around checking them all, but, the better answer to that question is when the plants need it. And in cacti and succulents, if there's a few that need to be constantly moist, like I have a beautiful welwitschia and I'm keeping that wet all the time. But for most of them, I won't water if they're at all moist. I want them, they're pretty much bone dry when I come in and water again. Going way back to the beginning, what I shared, that's why I like the core, because I don't have to be fearful of, now, so for folks who are growing in pots with mineral soils, it's not an issue. But in organic matter, this, in my opinion, is the main reason peat is a real problem. Because when that stuff gets really dry, you may as well thatch your roof with it. It's just not getting wet again. So, what I did, we're not quite done yet, but what I did is I made up a bunch of little sample, containers, and I want each of you to take one. They're over in that, crate over there. And there are instructions. I can only get so much information on here. So I want to make sure y'all really understand what I'm doing here. I will take, there's little scoops in there. And I found 20 milliliter scoops, which is the amount that I use. So I would take a level scoop of this and mix it with water in that gallon jug. Then when it's time to water, I would take, for every gallon I put in my sprinkling can, 1 cup out of there. Okay, that's how it works. You're not putting from here, you could put it directly into your irrigation water from here, but the problem is it's such a small amount that by running it through the dilution, you're more likely to get it accurate. Interestingly, there are 16 cups in a gallon of water, which happen to also be the ratio that a hose-on proportions at when working properly. So when I could take 1 scoop per gallon of water that I put in my concentrate tank and get virtually the same results. It's just pure luck.
I don't trust the hose. Used it for 50 years. I said, I don't trust it.
The thing that a hose-on will never do is give you more than you wanted.
Yes.
But it can give you less than you wanted. And more than you wanted can be very disastrous,
Yeah.
but less than you wanted is. So I prefer the piston injectors, but not everybody wants to get that involved. So if you're sprinkling can water, there you go, do it with a sprinkler. Yes, sir.
The alternative is to get a 50-gallon trash can, rough back, fill it with your solution that you want to put on your plants, drop a sump pump in it, and water with that.
Absolutely. There's all kinds of ways to do it. I'm just sharing my method, but that would be
Yeah.
another way to do it. Yes.
Okay, I think it would be better for your questions.
Thank you. I'm trying to, I try not to, yeah, it's, okay. Yeah, we're actually close, so, thank you for doing that. Let's see where I am right now. Gallon concentrate. I mentioned that I'm doing desert hydroponics, where the potting mix that I use has virtually no nutrient holding capacity or very low level of it. But you can also do this in other soils, like your regular soils. But you might not want to do it every time, because the soils are grabbing the nutrients and holding them. So just be aware that if you're growing in what you think is a high cation exchange capacity thing, I would not do it every time. But when you have soil that's not holding a lot of nutrients every time has been working for me. Uh, so I said that on the slide. That really wraps it up. And that's all I have. I just wanted to finish with that picture of my front yard. And I'm gonna brag a little bit. So when I came there, the only thing were those two saguaros that had been transplanted. I moved to the house in the fall of 2016. This saguaro that was the top of it right there, and it was a spear. And I was fertigating all of my yard for the first couple of years. So since 2016, it had those arms. It's got another one coming up there, and things have really grown. I didn't know the plants, so when I planted, I just had no idea. There were no labels. So this is are they calling it Echinopsis tersheki, or I don't know, it's a tersheki. This was a 8-inch tall gallon plant. I probably took this picture about 2 years ago. Things have really grown. This was a Euphorbia rhodiola that was one cutting in a 3-gallon pot, maybe this high. I think I overgrew them. I have problems with, can I confess this to the group? I have a lot of opuntias out in the yard. I didn't bring any pictures, but they overeat. And so I have to really keep the fertility off of them. They're like a glutton at a salad bar, not salad bar, I guess.
Solid wheat.
Yeah. Well, they're not. They're beautiful plants. I just love them to death. So I want to thank you, and we did answer some questions along the way. This gentleman had a question at the onset. Do y'all have any questions? Is there anything I can answer? In general, anything else off topic, I'm fine with that. Yes, sir.
Just saying, 25 or 50, so what you're, for the fertilization, right?
Yes, I am suggesting that what I have been doing is a fertilizer rate. I'm using triple 20 at 50 parts per million with every watering. And it's working for me. I know Miles down at Miles to Go, Miles Anderson. He is actually using a higher rate than I am. I was surprised to hear that. But yes, I'm doing that every time, and I'm not burning anything. Like I said, I think a few of my plants are getting over fertilized, but I'm a nurseryman. I don't want to grow them fast and get them out the door and make the money. I just can't stop. So, and yes, sir.
Vinegar to the gallon of water.
You still want to add the vinegar. And so I don't add the vinegar to that concentrate gallon. I add it to the sprinkling can if I were doing that, because I don't want the two of them being together very long. So you start growing bread mold or whatever's going on in there. So I dump. That's a very good question. If you're doing watering can, you want to add your couple teaspoons of vinegar, after you're mixing up your diluted solution. Yeah, excellent question. Yes, sir.
How often do you do a full leach where you just flush the pot?
Every time it rains.
It's not very often.
There's a bunch in Phoenix.
There's a bunch of feeder. Yes, sir. You're talking about this right here?
Yes.
That's Echinopsis tersheki. I think they might call it a Mexican saguaro. I don't know.
Argentina.
I don't really know. Pardon me?
Argentine saguaro.
Argentine saguaro.
Let's see it in the genus name.
Wow, well, you've been wonderful. Thank you for having me here. And don't forget to get your freebies over there.